Hi everyone, I'm Maya from Huawei, and welcome to our first Seed for the Future webinar in 2023. Seed for the Future is Huawei's CSR flagship program that brings the young talent all over the world to learn about the latest in technology, be inspired by innovation, and apply their knowledge for social good. To us, Seeds for the Future, the spirit of technology that we believe can really bring positive changes to society. What better way to kickstart our first webinar of this year by bringing together brilliant minds to discuss what innovative technologies such as 3D printing can really do in the present and the future. Most of you may have heard about 3D printing, where materials are deposited, joined, or solidified under computer control to construct three-dimensional objects, from increased efficiency to decreased cost. This breakthrough has shown itself extremely beneficial to various industries. In today's webinar, we will be diving into the topic of 3D printing. But before we get started, let's welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Ibrahim Ozbolat, the professor at Penn State University. He's also an advisory board member at Printer and BioLife 4D. His main area of research is in the 3D bioprinting and is well achieved in this field, including being the author of 3D bioprinting, fundamentals, principles, and applications. Institute Award recipient at the 2022 Turkish Health Institutes and the famed Junior Award recipient at the International Outstanding Young Researcher in Freeform and Additive Manufacturer Award in 2015. We're so excited to have you here, Dr. Ozbolat. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today.
We are also very excited to have invited our newly elected global ambassadors to join this conversation. Please join me in welcoming them. Hamza, you can introduce yourself and say hi to our audience.
Hello everyone, my name is Hamza Al-Ramani and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I am a Global Seeds Ambassador and a Computer Information Systems student. I am passionate about technology and the impact it can have on people's life. Thank you for having me here today and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Hamza. And next one, Jayton, you may tell the audience where are you from and say some words to our audience.
Sure, thank you so much, man. So, hello everyone. I'm Jatin from Nepal. Currently, I'm pursuing my bachelor's in computer engineering. Aside from this, I'm quite passionate about entrepreneurship and AI research. So, I'm really looking forward to work with all of us today and have a great time with Dr. Ozbolat and my fellow global ambassadors. Thank you so much.
And the last one, Reem.
Hello everyone, I'm Reem Niadi and from UAE, and my major is information security. I'm so excited to be here today.
Now we've met everyone. I'd like to invite all of you in front of the screen to ask our panelists anything you like during the webinar by sending them in the comment section. We will spend some time to address the questions after each section. So I think our audience is curious about the current status of 3D printing in the industry. Let me kickstart with the first question to Dr. Ozbolat. We heard a lot about 3D printing, and 3D printing have become the hot word recently. We heard many comments about it being a revolutionary new technology. But what is the main difference between 3D printing and the current situation of industrial production? And will you think that 3D printing eventually replace all of them, Dr. Ozbolat?
Yeah, thank you, Maya, for the question. So 3D printing, as you described, is a technology where you build objects in a layer-by-layer fashion. And then you can create very complicated shapes, which is not really quite feasible using traditional manufacturing techniques such as welding or machining or casting processes. So as I mentioned, the complexity is the major thing that we really use the 3D printing for. So you can literally create any difficult shape that you want per the design that you create. So you can print metals, you can print ceramics or plastics, but when we look at the origin of 3D printing, it's actually not that new. So it was created more than 30 years ago, but originally it was used for three-dimensional prototype fabrication. So it's not really making things for functional use, but just for making some prototypes that will ultimately give us some, idea whether this product can be manufacturable. So, but later in the last 10 years, right, we made huge progress in the field, and particularly, after 2011 with the boom in industry, right, 3D printing made a really huge jump, and nowadays we can make functional things. So we can make metal things, not just plastic prototypes, but the actual functional metal objects or products. But there are still limitations with the 3D printing, such as you can't really make something very, very strong compared to, say, a cast-made product, or sometimes we lack the surface finish that we want in terms of the quality, the surface finish quality. So in this regard, sometimes we may need to use other processes. So it's a disruptive technology which can replace many of the existing traditional manufacturing techniques, but not all of them, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Ozbolat. Now we will know from not functional to functional. That's really a huge improvement of 3D printing. So with that, I'm going to hand over the stage to our global ambassador, Hamza, to lead the first part of the discussion. Hamza, your turn.
I think I can speak on behalf of everyone in this webinar that we are very honored to have you join us today. Personally, I am interested in diving deeper into bioprinting, especially with the developments it has taken in the past few years, and I am fascinated by the potential of bioprinting to revolutionize the medical industry. And I am excited to learn more about the speaker experiences and insights in this field. So without further ado, let's get started. Many of our audience are here as they are interested in the technology of 3D bioprinting and are hoping to learn more about its applications in the pharmaceutical industry. Can you tell us more about how it works, as well as what is the difference between that and the 3D printing?
So follow up to the previous question, we use bioprinting pretty much with the same purpose, right? Building objects in a layer-by-layer fashion. And this time, instead of printing metals, plastics, or ceramics, so these are inert materials. So they are non-living materials. At this time, with the bioprinting, so here the bio prefix in the bioprinting term, it actually defines the material that we print. It's basically the cells. So with the bioprinting process, we have to have cells or other biological materials such as genes like plasmid DNA or RNA we can print, or other biomolecules or proteins that we can print. So once we print these, of course, ultimate goal is to make a functional tissue or organ that can be used for various different applications. As you mentioned, one application is in the pharmaceutical industry by creating three-dimensional models of the tissue. So we can use these for testing drugs, or in the meantime, for the same industry, we can also induce diseases or disease phenotype into printed tissues. So, for example, in the lab, there is a Gaucher disease. We build models of Gaucher disease, and we can test different drugs to screen the tissue. So along with that, we have other application areas, and I think one of the most important application areas in the regenerative medicine field, where we actually want these tissues to be transplanted in humans. So once we implant, repairing disease and damaged organs is the expected outcome from these printed tissues.
Yeah, thank you. We know that 3D printing has been becoming more well developed in the pharmaceutical industry and has also been branching out differently in various industries. In your opinion, are some industries more suitable to adapt to 3D printing than others? Why do you think such difference exists?
I think the difference comes from the readiness of the functionality of the printed tissues. So printing tissues for pharmaceutical testing, you want that tissue to mimic the native tissues or tissue physiology in a sense that you can predict the response of the drug. So you can test a drug, and this is very important for the clinical translation of the drugs because we want to make sure what we built in terms of the tissue model, it can accurately capture the validity of the drug before we try them on humans. Because currently we can use animals, right? Or we can use a two-dimensional cell culture or other primitive 3D culture methods. But these may not really accurately capture the physiology of the tissue. So in this case, we may need to have something that better recapitulates the tissue physiology. So 3D printing then has a major advantage of recapitulating this complex tissue physiology. So of course, bioprinting tissues for pharmaceutical testing is relatively easier compared to printing tissues and implanting them on humans and expecting that they're gonna function. So of course, we have different levels of complexities and difficulties in achieving the functional tissues for transplantation, particularly tissues like musculoskeletal tissues like cartilage and bone. Right, we have seen some progress. Even like there are some clinical trials, for example, with the cartilage, the ear printed and implanted on patients, or there are tissues like solid organs. They're vascularized, their function is very complicated, and they need to be scalable, and they're not really just like a mechanical support. So they have some function, like I'm talking about like lungs, heart, kidney, pancreas. So these are very complicated. So it will take some time, to get some functional tissues, and we test those on humans. So again, the short answer is just the functionality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. I think Dr. Ozbolat's reply clarify your doubts. And let's move to the second ambassador, Chetan. I believe you have something to say and ask. Your turn, Chetan.
Definitely, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hamza, and hello, Dr. Ozbolat, once again. So it was really an honor hearing you about so many important things. So, from my understanding, you have also achieved a lot in this field, from working in several aspects and companies of bioprinting and manufacturing, and also you have authored or sole authored a book. So that's really huge achievement, and you're indeed an inspiration for us. So I've got a few questions regarding this field. Like, do you really think bioprinted organs can be popularized in the medical field? And how do they solve the problem of rejection patients often worry about?
So it's a great question, and first of all, I would like to thank you for the kind words. And of course, the 3D bioprinting itself has been very popular, because not just recently, but I can say in the last 10 years, we have made quite a bit of progress in making tissues. So 15, 20 years ago, we could be able to print just cells. Nowadays we make tissues and ultimately creating organs that are scalable. And when we see more organs and tissues translated into clinics, and then we show the function on humans, then they'll become, different bioprinting technologies have different advantages, and bioprinting will become more popular. So again, one crucial fact is the rejection risk, right? So this is always important. And for the rejection risk, we basically rely on the patient's own cells. So these are called autologous cells. So we basically get the cells from patients, we expand the cells, so we reach into desired quantity that we want. And this can be stem cells, or this can be just primary cells from different organs, depending on if these cells can be easily obtained, or they can grow, or you can expand them. So once we get these in sufficient numbers, then we can print, and then we can implant, and then the risk of rejection will be minimal.
Wow, like the field of bioprinting is indeed very interesting. And thank you so much for the information, sir. So, bioprinting is a huge phenomenon, and there has been great leaps and bounds in advancing this technology to help the society. So, was there any moment in your career, the pivotal moment, where you realized how much societal good bioprinting brings? And what was that moment specifically?
So the pivotal moment, we have quite many pivotal moments from the society. So bioprinting has quite many social implications. So in my career, in the last 12 years as an independent investigator, even like starting from University of Iowa when I was an assistant professor. So we made progress in printing different tissues. For example, we print pancreatic tissue, we print cartilage tissue. So these tissues are important, of course, but sometimes we're getting emails from public and saying that, hey, parents are asking whether these printed pancreatic organs can be transplantable. So that it can cure diabetes in their kids. Or cartilage, for example, we printed cartilage and we made a press release back in 2016. It got a lot of attention, and that was performed by Dr. Yin Yu, who's now a professor at the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Shenzhen. So at that time, I got quite many emails from different people who suffer from cartilage damages on their knee. So they want some cartilage replacement, and particularly people playing football, soccer, basketball. And I tell them that, hey, we're doing some basic science and of course some applied research, and hopefully these things will be translated into clinics later. And we know that this is not really, giving us any sort of stress. Rather, it actually makes us aware of our responsibilities. So it puts more responsibilities to us, and we're aware of the fact that we're not really doing this research, not just trying to answer some fundamental scientific questions, but also trying to help people.
Indeed, sir. Thank you so much. So, I have a concern about the bioprinted organs actually. So, when we compare the real organs with the bioprinted organs, so how much good are the bioprinted organs regarding the terms of functionality and the performance?
So this is also a really good question. And this really depends on the organ or tissue that you're trying to print. So if it's musculoskeletal tissues that are load-bearing, like if you're trying to make cartilage, and if this tissue is avascular, that means it doesn't really need a vascular network, then it's easy. If this tissue is made of a single cell or a few different cell types, it's relatively easier compared to a tissue or organ that's made of several, dozens of cell types. So the more cell types, right, the need for vascularization, these are adding more complexities, and the more complexities make the job challenging, so that you may not really accurately recapitulate the physiology of that tissue or function of that tissue. But for musculoskeletal organs, we have already seen quite a bit progress in printed tissues, and we've verified most of those on animal models, including large animal models, and now we have recently seen some clinical translation. So this is, this is basically explaining the situation in a way that the musculoskeletal tissues, can translate into clinics relatively more straightforward, and you can attain the function that you want from these tissues. But more complex solid organs like lung, pancreas, brain, even like brain, right? We haven't really understood the brain very clearly. So if you don't know the physiology of brain at 100%, then you can't really recapitulate that. So you can't really build something that you don't know. So it will take some time for us to understand these tissue types. In the meantime, we rely on advances in other technologies like stem cell technologies, because cells are our raw materials. So we can't really build an organ if we don't really have the functional cells. So functional cells will give you a functional organ, right? So if your cells are not functional, forget about it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for answering all my questions so honestly. So, ma'am, I'd like to hand over the stage to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jiten, and thank you, Dr. Ozbolat, for sharing with us your views on 3D printing and 3D bioprinting in the industry. With that, I wanted to open the floor to our audience. Let's see what our audience will ask in the comment section to our panelists. Let me check. So I think still our audience is curious to know about what the bioprinting. Still the question about the organs. So to the Dr. Ozbolat, we would like to know, our audience, will there is a limit of replacing the 3D bioprinting or printed organs for one person? If there are any limits, or should I replace my organs one time or twice, or is there any limit?
So regeneration forever, right? This is the question that you're asking. It depends on, again, the cells. So if you can attain the cells, then functional cells, right? Then the creation of tissue or organ will be feasible. For example, you make a pancreas. So let's give a case here. So think about a patient with type 1 diabetes, right? So that person can't really secrete sufficient insulin, can't really regulate the glucose level in the blood. So this is a devastating disease. So if we want to print a pancreas that's glucose sensitive and producing insulin based on that, glucose sensitive manner, then you can eventually cure the disease, right? And then type 1 diabetes is itself is an autoimmune disease. So it's originated because the immune system attacks the cells in the pancreas. So even if you build a pancreas, then using patient's own cells, right, you need to protect that pancreas from the immune attack. So if the immune system attacks the printed organ, then you need another printed organ later on. So then you need a secondary one. Of course, you need to rely on the stem cells. So you can easily get the cells, say, from a biopsy, from skin biopsy. You have fibroblast cells from skin. You can reprogram them into stem cells, and from stem cells you can make beta cells producing insulin, and then from these cells you make an organ that can secrete insulin and transplantable. You transplant that and you try to protect it from immune system. There are different protection techniques, like you can encapsulate that into a device, for example, and that device can protect it from the immune cells attack. And ultimately, this can change over time. Over time, the device can degrade and immune system can attack it easily. So once the immune system attacks, then it will kill the cells. So you need a new pancreas there. So then again, you do the same process again and again. But sometimes the immune system may not really attack that tissue. So you make a bone. So the bone is functional, and eventually it's not gonna, crack again. Then you will not really need a secondary bone again, like a secondary surgery. So again, this depends on the organ that the patient needs.
Thank you. Another interesting question from our audience. I just checked the chat box. They'd like to know that this printed organs, this 3D bioprinting technology can also save our pets.
Of course, right? I mean, we try pretty much like all the tissues, on animals, right? So we use small animals like mice and rats, and then later we move to larger animals. So as long as we know that these organs are functional, right, on animals, then we can try on pets as well. So not just bioprinted tissues, but I've seen several 3D printed cases. So 3D printed prosthetic devices have been implanted on pets, like dogs. I've seen that many cases in the US.
Oh, that's interesting to know. Can I say that by using or replacing the organs or using these functional tissues, can we really cure the disease that may happen in human being or pets? For example, that we have the cancer on the heart. If we replace the heart, does this disease will be cured?
Yeah, hopefully, right? That's the ultimate goal with the bioprinting or other tissue engineering approaches. So we want to have this tissue implanted, and it will, cure the disease or replace the functionality of the disease or damaged organ. But again, we cannot really 100% guarantee that it's going to make a 100% functionality there once we implant. As I mentioned with the pancreas, right? Pancreas is more complex. It has both endocrine and exocrine function. So there's this insulin production, which is the endocrine function. There's also the exocrine, more like a secretion of different hormones. So you can build the pancreas from beta cells that are producing insulin, but it's not going to, secrete other hormones. So it will be something that will be partial. Sometimes you may not really need to create a whole organ with the 100% same as what you have in the body, right? With the same, full function, but sometimes even partial functions can be sufficient to, save the lives of people or pets.
Good to know. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ozbolat, letting us know the latest technology in the pharmaceutical industry, and also this fun fact about the 3D bioprinting that we haven't heard of it before. I'd like to thank you to everyone who submitted their questions, even though we couldn't get through all of your questions. But don't worry, we have a second Q&A part after the following discussion session. Now, before we get into the next part, we have a special live performance for you all. Join me in welcoming our young and stylish band, Naomi. Get ready to listen to a range of music styles. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Naomi.
Hello everyone and Global Seeds for the Future Students. We are Naomi. Thank you for having us be a part of this inspiring and meaningful event. We hope you like the song we are bringing you today. I will run, I will climb, I will soar. I'm not afraid, yeah. Jumping out of my skin, pull the car. Yeah, I believe it, yeah. The past is everything we were, don't make us who we are. So I dream until I make it real, and all I see is stars. It's not until you fall that you fly. When your dreams come alive, you're unstoppable. Take your shots, chase the sun, find it beautiful. We were glowing in the dark, turning dust to gold, and we dream it possible. I will chase, I will reach, I will fly until I'm breaking, until I'm breaking all my cage like a bird in the night. I know I'm changing, I know I'm changing. something big, better than before. And if take 1,000 lives, then it's worth fighting for. It's not until you fall that you fly. When your dreams come alive, you're unstoppable. Take a shot, chase the sun, find it beautiful. We were glowing in dark, turning dust to gold, and we dream it possible. From the bottom to the top, we're sparking fine fires, never quit and never fight. We're rest of our lives. From the bottom to the top, we're speaking fine lies, never quit and never stop. It's not until you fall that you fly. When your dreams come alive, you're unstoppable. Take a shot, chase the sun, find it beautiful. We were glowing in dark, turning dust to gold, and we dream it possible. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like, or Jupiter and Mars. In another world, hold my hand. In another world, darling, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In another world, please be true. In another world, I love you. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. And let me see what spring is like, or Jupiter and Mars. In another world, hold my hand. In another world, darling, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forever. my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies gray. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Another night, dear, when I was sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I wake up, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies gray. You never know, dear, how much more I need. Please don't take my sunshine away. Please don't take my sunshine away. Please don't take my sunshine away.
That was great. Thank you, Naomi. Before we get to the following part, let me remind you to drop any questions to our panelists in Q&A section. And your turn, Rim. Please ask your question to Dr. Ozbolat.
Hello, Dr. Ozbolat. You seem to have a lot of experience on 3D printing of living tissues and organs, and has been a popular topic within your field, especially related to disease modeling and infection purposes. With that in mind, what is your perspective on the application of 3D printing within your industry and its disruption on traditional methods?
So as I mentioned before, 3D bioprinting can be used for creating disease models. So we can induce that disease phenotype in the printed tissue, or it could be used for infections. Could be viral infection, could be bacterial infection. And we experienced the pandemic a few years back, and still we don't know much about the long-term impact of this virus to the human body. So of course we cannot really test these easily on animals, because the animals, they don't really replicate or recapitulate the human physiology. So we can use printed tissues, and we can, for example, create a lung tissue. I'm a part of a National Health Institute funded Center on Human Immunology. So I work with many immunologists, and my role in that center is to build three-dimensional lung tissue models. So we can create that lung tissue model, that we can ventilate that, like it can inhale, breathe, right? In the meantime, we can perfuse that, so we can perfuse the immune through the printed tissue. So with that, you can create a three-dimensional model of the disease, and you can infect that tissue with different viruses. So nowadays we're infecting that with flu virus, but we can also do that SARS-CoV. So, and understand how the virus will impact on the tissue. We can also look at that in the long term too. We can keep the tissue in culture for long term and see how the tissue physiology and function is impacted or is it impaired by the viral infection. So of course there are different tissues that we can print along with the lung, right? Could be nasal tissue, it can be the airways, bronchial tissue, and we can easily infect them with various different viruses. So the good thing here with the bioprinting is, compared to the traditional manufacturing, like traditional biofabrication techniques is, or manual approaches is, with the 3D printing, we can precisely print the cells, and we can localize various different cells as they appear in the tissue. So this is one advantage of bioprinting. It's a precise technique, so you can precisely, print the architecture you want. And the other good thing with the bioprinting is you can actually automate the process. You can make everything automatically in a high throughput form. So if you try to do that manually, this is what the standard is in the industry. So it will take a lot of time to make the tissue. But if you use bioprinting, for example, we have a paper that we recently submitted. Hopefully it will get published soon on the 3D bioprinting of the nasal tissue model, and we do infection on it. And we do that in a high throughput form. So that means we can print many of the tissues at a time, like 96 tissues at a time on 96 valve plates, and which can be easily used for the infection or can be used for drug testing studies.
It's clear that 3D printing has made strides, but it still has many space to grow. Where do you see the technical bottlenecks of 3D printing lie, and what are the trends for the future development?
So, yeah, this is a good question because although bioprinting has lots of advantages, right, it has still some weaknesses that we need to overcome. So one critical thing is towards the application of these bioprinted tissues, particularly for clinical application, is 3D bioprinting of scalable tissues. So in order to make something scalable, we need blood vessel network. So creating a blood vessel network with the bioprinting technology or other technologies from arteries and veins all the way down to capillaries in a manner which can replicate the need of blood vessels is still a challenge. So without getting that, we can't really make huge, like, scalable or volumetric wise equal to what we have in our body is still a challenge. Like, creating a heart with that complex vascular network, creating a kidney with huge complex vascular network has been still challenge. But we're making progress. So compared to where we were like 5 years ago, I think we have new approaches that show some promise in making that, but we still need time. And we have some interesting applications with the bioprinting nowadays, like some future applications where we have shown on different animal models. For example, we have a process called intraoperative bioprinting, where we can directly print the tissue on the patients in a surgical setting. So, for example, the patient goes to a surgical room, right, goes under a robotic bioprinter. So the robot itself is just like printing, say, the skull, right, directly, or it could be cosmetic applications, could be plastic surgery. You print a new face directly on the patient. So this has lots of advantages. And we'll see those hopefully in the clinics in the near future. And as you mentioned, that there are spaces to grow, right? Bioprinting has also some interesting applications, like printing tissues in space, right? So can we send the tissue with a space shuttle, or can we even print the tissue in microgravity conditions? So this is something that we're very interested in. For example, creating a lung model that we can infect that lung model in the space, because we know that astronauts, they also get infection, so their immune system can be weakened in the space, or the tissue becomes weakened, or the tissue physiology changes, or the virus become stronger. We don't know. So there is an interplay, there's a complex interplay between the virus, right, the tissue, the immune cells in the tissue. So we don't know this interplay in microgravity conditions. So if we can, make this in space and infect it in space, hopefully in the future, we'll see some interesting, cool applications of bioprinting.
Oh, that's very interesting, especially about the space one. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Riem, for your question. I noticed that Hamza still have some questions to doctor. So for the time reason, one last question for our ambassador. Go on, Hamza.
Dr. Ibrahim, will printing a human origins raise ethical questions in the future?
So it's an interesting question again. Ethical concerns, of course, could be a problem in the future. So we actually had a paper came out recently on the ethical issues related to bioprinted tissues and organs. For example, as I mentioned before, right, we need cells, and cells are the building blocks for bioprinting. So what happens if we get the cells from embryonic stem cells? Right. So then this will raise a lot of ethical questions, because embryonic stem cells itself is problematic in terms of the ethical aspects, right? Or nowadays, one of the popular technologies to using the gene editing techniques make stem cells allogenic. Allogenic means that it's from, you know, some patient or, you know, somebody else, not the patient itself or someone else. You get the cells, the stem cells, and you genetically edit these cells and you make them universal cells. Universal cells means when you implant them to different people, they won't really get rejected. So you can basically do it. Hopefully in the future, it will become, common in, in the field of stem cells and bioprinting. So once we use, say, these universal stem cells from someone and implant that into a patient, and that someone later can come and say, hey, I mean, this organ belongs to me, not to you, right? It will bring some ethical concerns. In the meantime, when we print cells, we actually use some materials like biomaterials, like hydrogels, and we load the cells inside these materials. And sometimes we drive these materials from animals, right? Animal source materials. So this may also bring some other religious concerns. For example, like Muslim people, they may not really be willing to, accept a tissue that is made using, using materials that derive from, say, porcine, right? So this is going to be a problematic case, sometimes ethical, sometimes religious, right? Sometimes safety concerns.
That
Wow,
was interesting. Thank you for your sharing.
Thank you, Hamza, and especially for the doctor who are so honest and open to tell us the current situation of this technology. The second part of Q&A, let's see what our audience would like to ask to see this opportunity, have this open discussion with our guest speaker. Okay, to Dr. Ozbolat from the audience. Although costs are efficient and faster production, do you think bioprinting is something that will be easily accessible in whole industry in the next few years?
So bioprinting has been accessible by the industry already, right? And particularly the bioprinting industry itself, as well as the pharma. So because the pharmaceutical companies, they have their own bioprinters, their own bioprinting capabilities, and they can print tissues, right? And hopefully we'll see those bioprinters in the clinics, in hospitals, like more. So there are some, but we want more, right, in the future. So, but there is a critical thing here. So having a bioprinter doesn't mean that you can make a tissue right away. You can make make an organ right away. So it's not a technology where you just click a button, like in the 3D printers, right? Plastic printers. You click a button, and then it prints the model for you, or the object for you, and then you get it and use it. But in the organ or tissue printing case, you need to get the cells, right? You need to prepare materials, and then once you print it, then you'll give some time to that construct to mature into a tissue level. So it takes some time. There's a lot of biological process going on, and you gotta put everything into devices like incubators or bioreactors that will provide optimum condition for cells to grow into a tissue. So and since the bioprinting machine, the bioprinter itself is not really giving you something that you can use right away, right? Because there's a lot of post treatments, right? So we cannot really say that just the bioprinter itself will give the 100% confidence to a company, or like someone, a technician working in a company, to build an organ. So that company needs to acquire that bioprinting skills and expertise in their facility, in order to successfully grow these tissues. So not just the bioprinter itself, but you need the expertise, right? You also need the skill set to make that tissue.
Got it. Oh, the last chance for our audience. So I noted that there are many of young people who are interested really in 3D printing. So they'd like to know what would you suggest to young people if they are interested in this technology? What major do they need to study if they want to enter the industry? And what are the employment or entrepreneurship prospects?
So I am an industrial engineer by training. Then I started a dual degree program in Middle East Technical University in Turkey on mechanical engineering because I like manufacturing. So then in PhD, I was looking for a place where I can work on 3D printing. So then I found a place where I could print, work on 3D printing. At the same time, that place just started tissue engineering. So when you combine tissue engineering and 3D printing, you eventually get bioprinting, right? So, but still, there are lots of things, lots of different skill sets and expertise that you need to gain. Like I'm learning immunology. I'm very interested in that because there's a huge immunology component of the bioprinted tissues, particularly when you transplant it or when you infect it. This is important. I'm trying to learn some surgical, surgical fields like in the medicine. So if we want to implant this, we need to know where we want to implant. So how are we going to hook up the vascular system? So how we can, create something vascularized. So we need to know how the bioprinter runs, right? So mechanical engineering skill set is really crucial because you deal with a machine and you need to know how you operate that printer. So you need to know biology because everything you deal with cells, right? You need to know chemistry because you got to prepare your materials that you print the cells with. So then you need to synthesize new materials. I'm talking about various different fields, right? In my lab, we have many different people from various different backgrounds: chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, industrial engineering, biology, medical school, chemistry. Think about these fields. Like, it's not just a single field, but many different fields eventually is really important. If you feel that, if you feel that you're open to different fields, I think this is going to give you a lot of advantage up front, right? Because you can easily, get into different fields. Like if you're a mechanical engineer, don't scare to get into biology. You'll learn it, right? You just give some time to yourself and learn it, and eventually you'll understand both fields, and then you can be able to make something at the end, right? Very productive. Again, everything takes time, so you cannot really make yourself, like an expert in everything. And you don't have to be expert in everything. So it could be, some expertise in different fields, but the other important thing is you need to work with the necessary, people with the necessary skill set. So you don't have to be an immunologist, but you can work with an immunologist. So you don't have to be a surgeon, you can work with a surgeon. So again, just be open, to any different fields so that you can build different skill sets that is necessary to be successful in the field of bioprinting. Of course, the field itself is growing. So we made a huge progress in the last 10 years, right? So I'm talking about like an over $1 billion market with over 120 companies. So 10 years back, we had only a few companies. Now 120 companies. Perhaps in 10 years, this number is going to be tenfold. We don't know because there are many different diseases. There are many different tissues. Okay, you can imagine that you can print, say, 100 different types of things, and that can be, used for pharmaceutical industry, or even when we have more organs translated into clinics, right? We're going to see a huge potential in the field of bioprinting. So we'll have lots of employment opportunities as well as entrepreneurship opportunities. So you can also, get into, you might have an idea, and then if it has potential, right? And since bioprinting itself has proven, right? It's a proven technology and already made some clinical trials, right? I see that there's a huge future and then the employment as well as entrepreneurship opportunities will be huge in the future.
Thank you. Open-minded, keep learning, keep exploring. I think that's the key for you, our young people, to enter in this industry. Thanks for this advices. I think that somehow match the pillars and the core value of our SEEDS program, like innovation, entrepreneurship, digitalization. So I believe our global ambassadors definitely already have that capability and those personality. What an inspiring webinar learning about the impacts of 3D printing and 3D bioprinting. For me, it was great to learn about how the emergence of 3D printing is revolutionizing productions for so many industries. And also our guest speaker talked about what's the current situation of 3D printing, 3D bioprinting, even some bottlenecks. The tech restricts. We have a transparent discussion today, and it's valuable to hear some even tips, advices for your young people, young career development in the future. Thank you, Dr. Ozbolat and our ambassadors, Hamza, Jayton, and Reem, for leading this conversation, and thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to follow our LinkedIn page for more updates on our program, and stay tuned for future webinars. See you all!